welcome to Chicago. Chicago started all the way back, guys, all the way back in 1673. That was when our very first two non-Native American explorers came through the area. Their names were Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet, and they were two French-Canadian men. They came through this area because they heard that there was a portage way, where essentially you could take your boat from New York through the Great Lakes, get to the Chicago River here. You'd have to walk your boat a couple miles, but eventually you'd hit the Mississippi and it would take you all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And they were like, if this is real, that would be amazing, because instead of having to go all the way around Florida to get to the Gulf, you could ship and trade straight through. So they came, they found it was in fact real, and it was in fact amazing. So they set up camp here. Shortly after that, we got our very first non-Native American resident. His name was Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, who was a Haitian immigrant who came through this area to set up a trading post just along Michigan Avenue. But from there, we started to grow. In 1833, we got our town charter with 350 residents. How cute, right? But by the year 1837, we had officially become the city of Chicago. Woo! The city of Chicago. Woo! This is the biggest boat I've had this season. You guys gotta act like it, all right? Now, where we are in the world right now is pretty well represented by these three flags you'll see flying in the wind. All the way at the top, you'll see our United States flag. Probably looks pretty familiar to most of you. Directly beneath that is a white flag with a little emblem. That's our Illinois state flag, the state you happen to be in. The third flag that's up there is a white flag with 2 blue stripes and 4 red stars. That is our city of Chicago flag. Pretty representative of where we are as a whole. The 3 white stripes on it stand for the 3 sides of our city: the north, the south, and the west side of the city. We don't really have an east side because we have a giant lake, which is also represented on the flag. Those 2 blue stripes stand for our 2 main bodies of water, Lake Michigan as well as the Chicago River. Those 4 red stars on our flag stand for 4 very shaping and significant events in our city's history. And by the time we finish this tour, you guys are going to be able to tell me what all 4 of those red stars stand for. We'll have a little bit of a quiz all the way at the end. But right now, our beautiful city is going to open up for you as we pass under our Lakeshore Drive Bridge. One of my favorite views of this city. Also, one of my favorite views of one of our new construction buildings. Just off to the left, you'll see this curving set of 3 blue towers. This building is called our St. Regis. It is Chicago's 3rd tallest building. It's also the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman, designed by Jeannie Gang. Jeannie is a local Chicago architect, and we are big fans of her here. She's also officially a genius. She went to Harvard for her degree, and she's won the MacArthur Genius Award, which actually makes her a genius. Now, this organic style of architecture is something that Jeannie is really known for. Curves on all 4 sides of the building, and those curves are highlighted even further by the 6 different shades of blue glass on the building. Now, you might notice towards the top of that tallest tower up there, 2 floors look a little bit different than all the rest. That's the 83rd and 84th floor in the building. Those floors are intentionally left open because those are what are called blow-through floors. What that means is they will always remain open, so as the wind hits this building, rather than adding the pressure, it's able to blow straight through the building and relieve a little bit of that pressure. This is the very first instance of entire blow-through floors here in Chicago, and it makes a lot of sense on this building because it is predominantly residential. If you just spend several $millions on a condo, the last thing you want is to get motion sickness in your own home. So a lot of effort and engineering went into reducing the sway from the wind on this building. Now, off to the left, you'll spot another one of Jeannie Gang's buildings. You'll spot these curving white balconies popping out from behind this triangle-shaped building here. That's Jeannie's building from 2009. It's called Aqua Tower. When Jeannie was designing this building, she wanted to make sure each resident and guest of the building got a unique and interesting view of something here in the city. Soldier Field, Millennium Park, Sears Tower, Hancock Building, all sorts of different things. So what she did is she set up a little scale model of the city of Chicago. She put her little rectangular building right where she knew it was going to sit, and then she took pieces of yarn from different points of the building out to those different exciting things. Based on those pieces of yarn and their vantage points, she created each one of these balconies individually to give you a unique view. No two are alike, individual cast concrete, which gives it this wavy, watery feel that gives the building the name Aqua Tower. If you ever get a chance, I do highly recommend going straight up under this building, almost like you're about to walk in the front door. And just look up. You get an absolutely stunning view of those balconies cascading all the way down at you. Now, this next building we'll take a look at is the 2nd tallest building in the city of Chicago. It is directly in front of you. This building is 1,389 feet tall, including that decorative spire you see sitting all the way at the top. This is our Trump International Hotel and Tower, and it was designed by the architect Adrian Smith. Now, Adrian also very conveniently designed the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa building over in Dubai. That building is 2,717 feet tall, which means, as you take a look at this building when we pass out from underneath this bridge, if you took this building, including its decorative spire, and you stacked it on top of itself, you'd have about the height of the world's tallest building, which is both impressive and terrifying, all at the exact same time. Now, this building is done in a style of architecture known as contextualism, meaning it looks at the context around it to inspire its design. You'll see it's angled towards the Chicago River, acknowledges the river exists. You'll also see these three setbacks, these cutouts, these balconies in the building. Those are meant to align with heights of buildings that came before it. The first, the lowest setback, is about the same height as this white building just off to the right. The second setback is intended to be about the same height of those curvy corncob towers off to the left. And then that third setback is just about the exact same height as the black building directly behind it. So contextualism, looking at the context to inspire its design. Now, I mentioned to you this beautiful white building just off to the right. This one is called our Wrigley building. The name Wrigley might sound familiar if you've ever had a slice of Wrigley Juicy Fruit gum, or perhaps you've been up to Wrigley Field to cheer for our Chicago Cubs. Go Cubs, go. Same Wrigley family. Now, the portion with the clock tower on it was completed first in 1921. The portion without the clock tower completed in 1924. Now, these two towers are done in what's called a Beaux-Arts style of architecture, which means it really harkens back to our European styles. Very decorative, very ornate, very detailed. Now, these two towers are covered in over 250,000 terracotta tiles, all in 6 different shades of white. What they do is they start a little bit darker at the base of the building, and as they rise to the top of the building, they get a little bit brighter, a little bit more opulent. It's meant to be almost like an optical illusion to kind of draw your eye from the base of this building all the way up to that stunning clock tower at the top. Clock tower itself is meant to be pretty reminiscent of a clock tower over in Sevilla, Spain. Now, actually, each of these 250,000 terracotta tiles are all numbered and computer cataloged. So if any of those tiles gets broken or chipped, we know exactly which number tile we need to replace. Now, this next building we'll be taking a look at is another Beaux-Arts, European style of building. When we pass from under our Michigan Avenue DuSable Bridge, if you take a little bit further look off to the left, you'll spot this domed building with the water towers on the corners there. This building is called our Jewelers Building, and it was completed in 1926, and it was in fact home to jewelers, hence the name. But jewelers were pretty hot commodities in the 20s and 30s in Chicago because of the mobsters and gangsters here. So we decided we should probably help our jewelers out a little bit by adding in a little security feature in the form of a very large elevator. What you could do is take the jewels in the trunk of your car, straight off a Lower Wacker Drive, just off to your left, pull right into the center of this building, take that elevator up to your floor, park on your floor, and then remove the jewels from the trunk of your car straight into your showroom. So you never had to worry about anybody else ever laying hands on them. And it worked for about 14 years until cars got too big and it didn't fit in the elevator anymore. It has since been removed. Now, I also mentioned this black building just off to the right to you, right behind our Trump Tower. This building is called our AMA building, designed by the German architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Now, Mies van der Rohe was known as the father of the black box style of modernism, which I feel is pretty self-explanatory when you look at this very large black box. But 3 things that were pretty important to Mies when he was designing his buildings: form, line, and ratio. Form, we just talked about that black box style. Line, those racing steel I-beams that run all the way throughout the building, leading you all the way up to the top. And ratio, when we come out from underneath this bridge, take a look at each one of the windows on the building. Each one is done in what's called the golden ratio. That's 3:5 as 5:7. It's considered to be the perfect ratio in mathematics. It's even the same ratio as the Parthenon. So form, line, and ratio. We'll get back to Mies van der Rohe in a little bit, I promise you. But we've got 2 other very interesting forms in our Chicago River, these curvy corncob towers of Marina City. Marina City was designed by another German architect, Bertrand Goldberg. These 2 buildings are actually 2 of the 5 buildings that comprise Marina City. These 2 are apartment towers. Directly behind them is a shorter office tower. Today it's a hotel. The House of Blues Theater is up there as well, originally a movie theater. And then this lower building kind of connects all 4 of the upper buildings together. When Goldberg was designing this set of buildings, he was kind of trying to combat what was going on in Chicago in the 1960s. And that was the fact that nobody really wanted to live downtown. It wasn't easy to be down here. You had nowhere to park your car, nowhere to buy your groceries, nowhere to walk your dog.
So cool.
So Goldberg said, well, what if we create a city within a city? So you could live in the apartment towers, work in the office tower, play in the movie theater, and everything else you ever needed was going to be in this lower building. You had a corner store, dry cleaner, restaurants, bowling alley, even a marina to park your boat, from which Marina City gets its name. This entire complex of buildings was officially opened in 1968, and people have been living there ever since. Now this next little building is in fact more of a little building. You'll see just off to your right this red brick building with the clock tower on it. This one is called our Reed Murdoch building, and this one's done in a style of architecture known as the prairie style of architecture. Prairie style is meant to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more horizontal, because it's meant to honor the horizontal nature of the prairies of Illinois, the state you happen to be in. If you look closely at the building, you might even spot a couple wheat heads hidden throughout the design. That's meant to acknowledge what grows in the prairies of Illinois. Now the Reed Murdoch building was first completed in 1914, and it was first built as a wholesale grocery warehouse. So this was the big old store that all the tiny local grocery stores were coming to pick up their what they were going to sell for the week. But long before we had Jewel-Osco and Whole Foods and all those things, we had grocery warehouses. Now when this building was first completed, it was built symmetrically. Today, that's not quite the case. If you're looking closely, you might notice the eastern portion of the building, closer to us now, is actually one bay longer than the western portion of this building. And that's because in 1927, the city of Chicago decided they wanted to widen LaSalle Street, the bridge we're about to pass under here. It's one of our main business streets downtown. And the only way to do that was to knock down the last bay of this building and replace that corner mirroring the one on the other side. So today, no longer symmetrical. Today, this building is home to companies such as the Encyclopedia Britannica Company, because yes, they do still exist. I think that might be the most shocking fact on the tour today. They actually just celebrated their 258th birthday. Now this next little red brick building off to your right says the Chicago School on it, because it's done in a style of architecture called the Chicago School style of architecture. Has nothing to do with the name on the outside, but it's very helpful to remember. Chicago School style is done in 3 pieces, much like a Greek or Roman column. You'll see that low and heavy base, that rise in center column, and then that decorative ornate capital or crown all the way at the top. Style of architecture was made famous here in Chicago, hence the name, and made famous by the architect Louis Sullivan, who has buildings all throughout our city. Now this next building you won't be able to miss, because it will be the largest building we see on the tour today. In fact, this was the largest building in the world when it opened in 1930, about 4 million square feet on the inside of our merchandise mart. That's about 70 US football fields that could fit inside. Now our merchandise mart building originally opened as our Marshall Field's wholesale warehouse, done in a style of architecture known as Art Deco. You'll see those rising columns leading you all the way up to the top of the building, the dark setback windows that make those columns look even taller, the repeated chevron or arrow motifs, and then those opulent bronze squares that kind of bring you back to the roaring 20s Great Gatsby time in our history. Now when this building was no longer being used as the Marshall Field's wholesale warehouse, the Kennedy family purchased it. Joseph Kennedy added in these 8 Pez dispenser heads, I like to call them, along the way. These are our merchant princes, our retail princes here in the city. 2 of the names that might sound familiar: Aaron Montgomery Ward, known for his catalog company, and then Mr. Marshall Field, known for the original department store in the city of Chicago. Now I told you this was the largest building in the world when it opened. The building that finally topped it was the Pentagon when it opened in 1943. Now we're heading into one of my favorite areas in Chicago. This area is called Wolf Point. At Wolf Point today, you get a beautiful 360-degree view of some of our incredible steel and glass skyscrapers. But Wolf Point is really where Chicago got its start. I told you we got our town charter in 1833, and when we set up our town, we set it up from right here. Set up this area with 3 taverns and a hotel, because we had our priorities straight back then. But eventually, people started to move here, and it's kind of come full circle. People have started to move back here. Got Wolf Point East Condominium Towers to our right around the Salesforce Tower. We also have Wolf Point West Condominium Towers. A lot of people moving back to this area. Now, Wolf Point is also where the three branches of our Chicago River meet. We've just come down the main branch, starting to curve up to the north branch, make sure we're careful of all our kayaks, and then eventually we'll head to the south branch. And if you look at these three branches of the river from up above, a bird's eye view, they look like the letter Y. And that's where we get our city symbol in Chicago. It's a Y with a circle around it. And you can play I Spy and find that city symbol a little bit of everywhere. You can find it in manhole covers, electrical boxes. Take a look at the fence design just off to the right. You'll spot it hidden over there. Even go downtown to State Street. Take a look at our famous Chicago Theater marquee. Look at the horizontal Chicago. Right behind it, you'll see a big circle with the letter Y. All of that is acknowledging Wolf Point, where Chicago originated from. Now, this next building we'll take a look at happens to be the oldest building we'll see on the tour today. Directly in front of you, you'll see this pinkish brick building here. This one is called Fulton House. Now, Fulton House was originally completed in 1898 with a small addition made in 1908. And when it was first built, it was built as cold storage for our meat packing industry. Chicago was home to the world's largest union stockyards in the mid-1800s. Once meat was processed on those stockyards, a little bit further on the south branch, came up here on barges to the north branch, where it was held at cold storage facilities such as this one. Now, when this building was first completed, it was built with no windows because meat didn't really need windows. But eventually, the Union stockyards closed and we decided to repurpose some of these old cold storage facilities. In 1979, they let this building thaw for about 3 months before they were able to dig the windows into it. You can see how deep those walls are based on how deep those balconies are, just about 3 feet thick. And when they started to dig the windows in, they started to pull the insulation out, which was about 500 semi-trucks worth of horsehair and cork, which is what they were using to insulate the building. In 1981, Harry Weiss, the architect, opened up his redesign for Fulton House condominiums. Harry was very much known for his nautical sailing themes in architecture, which is why you might notice those portholes towards the top of the building. Now, directly in front of you, you've probably noticed this enormous bridge that's just sticking straight up in the air. This one is called the Old Carroll Street Bridge. Now, this bridge is a type of bridge called a bascule trunnion bridge. Bascule coming from the word meaning seesaw or teeter-totter, trunnion from the word meaning pivot point. This is a single leaf bascule trunnion bridge, which means only one side opens. Now, the Old Carroll Street Bridge, when it was completed in 1908, this was the longest and heaviest bascule trunnion bridge in the world. Because of that history, it received its landmark status in 1997, which means we will never tear this bridge down, even though it doesn't really go anywhere anymore. It was an old railroad bridge connected to one of our newspaper facilities, but since not too many newspapers are delivered by railroads anymore, we don't really need the bridge. They do still close it and open it once a year just to say that it still works, but for the most part it remains in that upright position. We have 37 movable bridges along the 3 branches of our Chicago River, and those bridges still open up and down pretty regularly, especially in the spring and in the fall when our sailboats need to go from their harbors, their dry docks out to their harbors, or in the reverse, depending on what season it is. So we've just finished up boat runs for the spring season, so all of those sailboats will stay out in their harbors in Lake Michigan until the fall, when we'll go through the reverse trip and all these bridges will yet again open to allow those sailboats back out. Now, we're here on the north branch of the Chicago River, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to turn our boat around to get a better view as we head towards the south branch, which means I'm going to put down the mic for a quick second. I'll kind of wander around, make sure everyone's doing all right. If you've already finished your beverage, it's a great time to go visit Frank and see if he'll make you another one, maybe something different, maybe a strawberry margarita, something exciting. Use the restroom if you need to, and I will be back on the mic when we get a little bit closer to our bridges again. Front cottages just off to your right over here. Harry also designed these buildings just off to the right, again very nautically themed. When Harry was designing these kind of weird buildings along our Chicago River, everyone told him he was crazy because no one was ever going to want to live that close to the dirty, dingy Chicago River in the 1980s. And Harry said, don't worry about it, I think it's going to be just fine. In 1988, he opened up these 4 condos here and 4 families moved in. 3 of those original 4 families still live there today. The very first family moved out in 2015 and they ended up selling their condo for about $2.3 million. So I would say Harry was pretty darn smart when he designed those condos so close to our Chicago River.
That's affordable.
Got some more condos as well. Told you a lot of people moving back to Wolf Point here. We've got this beige curvy building just off to the right. This one is called River Bend Condominiums. It's another example of that contextualism style of architecture. The bend of the building acknowledges the bend of the river down below. And actually the concave curve of this building mirrors the convex curve of this beautiful blue building just to the south of it. This building is called the River Point. I like to call this building the Hot Pocket Building. Perhaps the McDonald's apple pie building. It's kind of the shape that it has. But the shape of this building is structural. It's intentional. You might have heard that, that train horn. You might see these black polka dots, these exhaust fans. That's because there are railroad tracks over here. In fact, directly underneath this building. When the architects were designing it, they realized they couldn't drill those structural support columns straight up and down. They would have hit the train tracks. So what they instead decided to do was put those support columns at a slight angle to avoid the tracks, which led to the creation of that beautiful parabolic arch right at the base of the building. The one at the top, purely aesthetic, just to give it that hot pocket shape, but the one at the base is in fact structural. Now, I promise you, you can play I Spy and find Ys all over our city. Even in our buildings. You'll see this Y-shaped building of 150 North Riverside Plaza just off to your right. This building, very appropriately located at the Y of Chicago, had some of the exact same issues that River Point did. You had a river on one side and railroad tracks on the other. So you couldn't just drill those structural support columns wherever you wanted them to be. You would have hit something. So what the architects ended up doing was using only about 20% of their allotted space for that center portion of the letter Y. In that 20%, the caissons, the support columns, those drill down about 110 feet to hit the bedrock down below. The building kind of shoots up from there, cantilevers out into that Y shape, and the very first floor on this building is about 104 feet in the air. You get a nice view from where we are right now of kind of those ripply fins along the exterior. Those are meant to mirror the ripples of the river down below. Now, being that this building is so very tall on such a very narrow base, the engineers of the building put in a pretty cool engineering feature, what are called inertial slosh dampers. What that means is on the inside of this building, all the way at the top, there are very large water tanks that hold about 160,000 gallons of water. When the wind hits this building and it starts to sway in one direction, the water in those water tanks slosh up against the other side to pull the building back into an upright position. I told you we had to learn some really weird things in order to build buildings in Chicago. How do you build a building with a river on one side, railroad tracks on the other, that's not going to blow over in the wind? And the Getch Partners answered that question in a very interesting Y-shaped way in 2017. Now, our Getch Partners also designed another building right across the street. You'll see this beautiful blue building blending into the sky. Don't blind yourself today. This one is called our Bank of America building, and it was completed in 2020. It was the first fully commercial building in Chicago to be completed in the past 30 years. Now, this building is a great example of a relatively new ordinance in the city saying that any new construction building along our Chicago River has to be set back from the river at least 30 feet to allow for public access to the riverfront. And you can see the Getch Partners did not want to give up that 30 feet throughout the entire square footage of this building. So what they opted to do instead was to set back only the first 3 floors of the building, that 30 feet. The rest of the building then gently rests on these 3 enormous silver tridents there. So abiding by the city's ordinance to make sure you have that public access, but of course abiding by your client who just paid you a lot of money and wants as much square footage as possible. Heading under Washington Boulevard, we're heading into what I like to call Art Deco Canyon. We have 2 really beautiful Art Deco style buildings on either side of our boat, both built in the same year, 1929. Now I promise you, when we circle our boat around it a little bit, we will talk about the one off to the left because it's one of my favorites. But right now I want to focus on this beautiful building off to the right. This is 2 North Riverside Plaza, originally our Chicago Daily News building, a great example of that Art Deco style. This was also the first building in Chicago to be built on what are called air rights. What that means is those railroad tracks we've been chatting about, those run directly beneath this building here. And the railroad companies own all of the land that the railroad tracks sit on, as well as all of the air, up as far as the eye can see. So if you want to build a building over those railroad tracks, you actually have to lease the land. You have to lease the air from the railroads down below. So this was the very first building in the city of Chicago to do that, but all these other buildings along the way have done the exact same thing. Get a nice view of some of our railroads down beneath these buildings off to the right here. All the trains down there are heading towards Union Station. Now these next 4 buildings you see off to the right, these are all designed by the same architectural firms, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. And I like to use these buildings to talk a little bit about the evolution of our more modern styles of architecture. Right next to us, we have Gateway 1, completed in 1965. Its identical twin sister, Gateway 2, completed in 1968. These 2 buildings are done in that black box style of modernism that we talked about with Mies van der Rohe. And what Mies and his contemporaries, especially Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, were trying to show off with these big black boxes was this new exciting form of engineering. For so many years, we have been building buildings, stone on top of stone on top of stone. These 2 buildings are built a little differently. They're built a little bit more like bird cages. The steel frames on the exteriors of these buildings, that's what's holding the building up. The glass on the outside is almost hung like a glass curtain on that steel frame. So Mies kept saying, why would you ever want to cover this up with decoration or facade? This is innovation. This is engineering. Show that off. So that's where those very simple black boxes in the 50s and 60s kind of came from. Now in the 1970s, we decided we wanted to shake things up a little bit, you know? Spice things up. And the only way I can think to spice up a big black box is to put a white stone facade on it. Super spicy, right? 1971, Gateway 3 was opened. This building we called the International style of architecture. And that's because really in the 1970s, you could have picked up this big white box and you could have put it anywhere in the world. Didn't really rely on its surroundings for its design, so it could kind of hold its own in London, Amsterdam, New York, Chicago. Because it could be anywhere in the world, we called it the International style. Now in the 1980s, we really did start to shake things up. We finally started to bust outside the box a little bit, literally. You'll see this curvy green glass building of Gateway 4 just off to your right. This building, completed in 1986, you cannot pick up and put anywhere in the world. The only place that this building makes sense is right here along the Chicago River in Chicago, Illinois. The curve of the building acknowledges the curve of the river down below, and the green glass that covers this building bows out a little bit to create these green, glassy ripples that are meant to look pretty reminiscent of the green, glassy ripples of our Chicago River. So because this building relies on the context around it to inspire its design, we call this style contextualism. Now right across the way, from our kite and our green glassy building, we got a nice little map of the city of Chicago. All the way at the top, you'll spot that Y of Wolf Point I mentioned to you, and that little red dot lets you know that you are here. This building was not too exciting along our Chicago River. No one was really noticing it, so they decided to put a giant map on the building to literally put the building on the map. It's about as good as my jokes get, guys. I hate to break it to you. Now off to the right, you'll spot this enormous beige building. This one might look pretty familiar if you've ever seen the movie Batman's The Dark Knight. Right at the beginning of that movie, the Joker steals a large sum of money from the Gotham City Bank. He escapes in his school bus down to Lower Wacker Drive, where they eventually blow up a semi-truck, which they actually did. But this is, in fact, the Gotham City Bank, also known as Chicago's old post office. Originally completed in 1932, it was the largest post office in the world at the time, which made sense in Chicago. So we have things like the Montgomery Ward Catalog Company, the Sears and Roebuck's Catalog Company, a lot of things that needed to be shipped. I think my favorite fact about this building, though, is when they finished it in 1932, they left a giant hole in it. intentionally, for some pretty impressive forethought and city planning, because 25 years later they decided to run a giant highway system straight through the building. Always kind of blows my mind to think about the architects going, I think in 25 years we might invent the highway system. Better leave a hole just in case. But it worked. The building was used all the way through until 1996, when the city decided it was far too large and they wanted to shut it down. But they couldn't tear it down because they had run a giant highway system straight through the building. So the building sat vacant for about 20 years. It wasn't until 2016 that this building was finally purchased and fully renovated to the tune of about $900 million. Today, this building is home to companies such as Walgreens, PepsiCo, and Uber. If you happen to be a tenant to the building, you do have access to the 2.5-acre rooftop park they added in during the renovation. Prairie grasses, places to sit, basketball courts. Kind of a nice way to spend your lunch break, I'd say. Now we are along the south branch of our Chicago River, and over here is where I like to start chatting a little bit about those 4 red stars I mentioned to you very early in the beginning of this tour. We're going to start by talking about star number 2 on our flag, because oddly enough, star number 1 was the last star we added, so we'll get back to that one in a little bit. But star number 2 on our flag stands for a pretty devastating event that took place in Chicago in 1871, the Great Chicago Fire. Now when I hear most people talk about the fire, I hear them say, well, the cow kicked over the lantern and set the whole city ablaze. But my friends, we have got to stop blaming Bessie. It was not her fault, okay? I'm here to share with you what actually happened during our Great Chicago Fire. A couple things you need to know about the city leading up to that day. Thing number 1, Chicago had about 14 straight weeks of drought leading up to October 8th. So we were a very, very dry city. Thing number 2 is that Chicago's population was booming in the mid-1800s, so we had to build cheaply and we had to build quickly. So we built out of the most common material we had available, wood. We built the cutest little wooden city you ever did see, until you didn't see it anymore on October 8th of 1871. Not too far from us, just a couple blocks further west, was Mrs. O'Leary's barn. Now we do know the fire started in her barn, but to this day we have absolutely no idea what started the fire. We also know that the watchman that evening saw the fire start and they called it into the fire department, but they called it into the wrong address. So the fire department rushed to the wrong address to see no fire around them, and at that point the wind started to pick up, started to push the fire a little bit further east. Now everyone here in the city kind of hoped that this giant body of water, the Chicago River, would help protect the city from the fire. Except, like most cities along waterways in the mid-1800s, we were using the river as a dumping grounds for our sewage. So not only did the river not protect us, it actually caught on fire. The fire continued to burn a little bit further east. Eventually the wind shifted, started to push that fire north. It jumped over the river a second time. And by the end of this fire, 3 days later, 3.5 miles of our city had burned. 17,450 buildings completely destroyed. About a third of our population was left homeless, and 300 people were killed. Absolutely devastating for our city. And yet, it gave us kind of this cool opportunity that not too many other cities got to have. We got to look at the mistakes we made initially and correct them the second time around. We got to learn things. Like wood is flammable. I think we had to figure that one out already. But the second time around, we built out of things like steel and stone, which kept our city a little bit safer and in fact made it a little bit taller. The very first skyscraper ever in the whole wide world was built right here in Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire. So who knows what our world's architecture might look like had we not had that fire. Now, a couple years after the fire, the journalists who reported that it was poor Bessie the cow who kicked over the lantern, those journalists came out as saying they had lied. They had made the whole thing up. Unfortunately, the Irish were not well liked here in the 1870s, and we needed to blame the fire on somebody. We needed a scapegoat to perhaps a escaped cow. And poor Bessie and Mrs. O'Leary got the brunt of it. But I think my favorite Chicago fact is that in the 1990s, well over 100 years after this thing was done and over with, we felt so bad about blaming the O'Learys and poor Bessie that we actually used taxpayer dollars to have an official pardoning ceremony for the cow. 100% real. That's how we roll here in Chicago. We pardon the cows. Now, 22 years later, after the fire, we had rebuilt our city even bigger, even better. A brand new second city, if you will, that nickname. And we decided we wanted to show off our brand new city to the world with a giant party, with the World's Fair, the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893. Really big deal for the city of Chicago. We made it the third red star on our city flag. Now, a lot of exciting things happened at that World's Fair. 27 million people came to visit us, for starters. Number one, shredded wheat was invented. Cracker Jack was invented. Milton Hershey bought his very first chocolate making machine. Bertha Palmer invented the brownie, the dessert. You have to thank Chicago for every brownie you've ever eaten. The zipper on your clothes made its debut. The Ferris wheel was invented. Pabst Blue Ribbon won its blue ribbon, guys. Very exciting things. Now, Daniel Burnham was the head architect of that World's Fair of 1893. He decided he wanted to leave all the main buildings for this fair this impressive unified color. Thought it was going to look really cool to have this white colored neoclassical city. Not only that, this was the first widespread use of the electric light bulb. So these white colored buildings were literally going to glow in the dark. Fun facts, L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, was living in Chicago during the time of the World's Fair and was fascinated by this concept of a one-colored city, which led him to create the Emerald City. So you can thank Chicago for the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz. Now, this World's Fair really put Chicago on the map. No longer are we this stockyard city, this railway city, this weird little city in the middle of the country. We are this beautiful world-class city, a destination city, which obviously works since most of you are still visiting us here today. Now, I feel like we can't pass by this kind of weird, curvy building without chatting about it just a little bit. This one, does this one look familiar? Does this one look like any other buildings we've seen along the river today? The Corn Cobs, yeah, very nice. Same architect. So you guys, like, give it another, 8 boat tours and you guys are gonna be architects. I believe in you. Now this one, Bertrand Goldberg completed this in 1986. This one's called River City, and it was his second attempt at that city within a city concept. Except this one didn't quite work out as well as the first one did, simply because we're a little bit further removed from that downtown area of Chicago, especially in the 1980s. So at that point, not as many people wanted to live down here. Goldberg's original plan for this set of buildings was to have a number of these snaking letter S's running up and down the South Branch of the Chicago River. But because not as many people wanted to live down here, only one letter S got completed. As we come around the big curve, you'll see where it just kind of dead ends into those concrete walls. Didn't quite come to fruition in the way that he wanted. Now, people do still live in River City today. They live on the inside as well as on the outside. Every once in a while, you can spot a couple of houseboats down there. They do bubble and agitate the water in this particular marina so that even when the river freezes, because yes, it does freeze, you can still live in your houseboat all year round. Personally, I don't think I'd want to live in my houseboat if the river were freezing around me, but again, to each their own. We are going to bring in Goldberg's plan for residences along the South Branch to fruition, just in a slightly less S-shaped way. You'll see right next to us here, this new construction building of The Reed. The Reed is part of a project called the South Bank Project that encompasses all this new construction you'll start to see off to the right. Its sister project, the River Line Project, you might have noticed that new building they were building as we turned our boat around. That project, as well as this project, are going to bring about 3,700 new residences to the South Branch of the Chicago River. So come back in the next couple years and this area is going to look very different. Right now we've got the Reed completed, as well as directly behind it the Cooper. We've got these two other new constructions as well as this beautiful river walk. We talked about that ordinance saying any new construction requires access, public access to the riverfront. So they've done a really nice job with this river walk over here, adding a lot of native plants in, bat houses, bird houses, all sorts of different things to really make this area of the river a beautiful place to be. Now this next building we'll take a look at is going to be directly behind our willow trees here. You'll start to spot another Art Deco style building with a slightly pointed roof and a teeny tiny little figure all the way at the top. This building is called our Board of Trade building, and that teeny tiny little figure all the way up there is the goddess Ceres. She's the Roman goddess of grain. It's where we get the word for cereal, as well as cerveza comes from Ceres. And it made sense to put her up there because in 1930, when this building opened, we were predominantly trading agriculture. A little bit different than what we trade today. This was also the tallest building in the city when it opened in 1930. Now directly in front of you, you'll see this pink granite building with that beautiful crown on it. That pink granite comes straight from Texas. It's the same granite that makes up the state capitol in Austin down there. So thank you, Texans aboard, for your pink granite. This building called 311 South Wacker, when it first opened, that beautiful crown all the way at the top of the building first lit up with 1,852 fluorescent light bulbs. For no other particular reason than for the architects to say, that's my very tall, very bright building. But the problem was, it was a little bit too bright, especially for our birds. As they were flying through their migration paths, they started to see a large glowing orb in the sky. And it was not the moon, it was 311 South Wacker. Once we realized this was going on, we figured we should probably help our birds out a little bit. Now during certain migration periods, we turn those lights off completely. Now directly behind it, you'll see that tall black building with the 2 white antenna. This is our tallest building in the city of Chicago. If you've been over to it or perhaps up in it, you know it is spelled W-I-L-L-I-S. Here in Chicago, we pronounce that Sears. The Willis is silent. It's a weird Chicago accent thing. We talk about it later if you need to. But the Sears Tower, the Willis Tower, yeah, Sears Tower. When this building was completed, this was the tallest building in the world. Skidmore, Owings & Merrill were the architectural firm, Fosler Kahn, the lead engineer. When they were talking about the design for this building, they had no idea how to build a building so tall because no one had ever done it before. So they started to play with some cigarettes, which you should not do. But what they noticed was, if you stacked one cigarette on top of the other, you got a very tall structure, but it wasn't very stable. Then what they noticed was, if you pulled those cigarettes up at different heights, bundled them together at the base, you also got a very tall structure that was a little bit more sound. And you can see that reflected in the design here today. 9 square columns at different heights bundled together at the base to create the full height for this building and give it a little bit more stability. Now it is very important to have structurally sound buildings for obvious reasons, but especially here in Chicago because of our wind. On normal, windy days, this building can sway about 6 to 8 inches in any given direction. On very, very windy days that happen like once every 100 years or so, this building is built to withstand up to 18 inches of sway in any given direction. That is 3 full feet of sway, like 1 meter. Which is terrifying to me on so many levels. You could not pay me to go up there on a day like that. I'm even told on normal windy days, if you go up to the top, you can watch the water in the toilets up there slosh from side to side. Again, no. Like, just no. If you want to go up there, you can. If you take a look at the western side of the building up here, you'll notice these 5 glass boxes, the sky deck, the ledge. You can go stand in those glass boxes and get a straight shot view all the way down to the concrete, a little over 1,000 feet below your feet. Y'all go up there. Tell me all about it. I'm gonna stay here on the boat, guys. The boat is safe. Now this building is 1,451 feet tall. The Council on Tall Buildings, which is actually what they're called, measures the height of a tall building from the lowest pedestrian entrance all the way to the height of the topmost architectural feature. You probably noticed at the top of our building we have 2 very tall white antennae. Those are not architectural features, those are utility features. Lightning rods, antennas, satellite, all of that is utility. It does not add to the height of your building. Now, if you happen to have a decorative spire at the top of your building, that is architectural, and it does count. So buildings like One World Trade Center over in New York, currently this country's tallest building, that building is 1,776 feet tall, including its decorative spire. The roof of that building in New York is about 5 feet shorter than the roof of our Sears Tower here. But because they have a decorative spire and we have 2 utility antennae, they win as the tallest building in the country. Obviously, we here in Chicago are well aware that our building is in fact bigger and in fact better. It's fine. We'll give it to the New Yorkers. You guys can have it. We're still very proud of our Sears, our Willis Tower. Now over here along this portion of the South Branch of the river is where I like to mention star number 4 on our Chicago flag. We worked our way through 2 and 3. Star number 4 in our Chicago flag stands for another very exciting event in Chicago's history. This one was our second World's Fair. It happened in the year 1933 and it was entitled A Century of Progress, celebrating 1 century of the town of Chicago's existence. Told you we got our town charter in 1833, so 100 years later we decided to have a big old birthday party. This World's Fair, starkly different than the first one. Rather than having those white neoclassical buildings in that white city, we had modern Art Deco buildings all painted in different rainbow colors. So this time, we had a rainbow city. Technological advances that made their debut in this World's Fair, the Zephyr train was invented. It was the fastest train in the world at that time and made a trip from Colorado to Chicago overnight. No one could fathom how a train could travel that distance in less than 24 hours. If you ever want to go see that original Zephyr train, you can. It was housed at the museum, or is housed at the Museum of Science and Industry in our Hyde Park Southside neighborhood of Chicago. Now, 48 million people were in attendance at this World's Fair. It lasted a little bit longer than the first one. It was 16 months long because it was happening during a time of Great Depression in this country. So trying to bring back a little bit of industry and a little bit of commerce to a city hard hit by depression. So second World's Fair, 1933, 4th Red Star on our city flag. But we are about to pull back in to Art Deco Canyon, and I promised you that we'd take a look at our beautiful Civic Opera building. This building, Art Deco style, completed in 1929, and if you take a look up at this building, you might notice that this building takes a look back at you. You might spot these comedy and tragedy faces hidden all throughout the design for this building. That's meant to acknowledge what goes on inside this building. The theater, the opera that takes place here. The very first opera that ever made its debut in this building made its debut 1 week after the stock market crash in 1929 in this country. So if you ever take a look at opening night photos, you might notice that everybody looks pretty darn sad because this was probably the last nice thing they'd ever do with their money. If you want, you can wave up to the 7th floor of this office tower here. Don't blind yourself, because that's my old office. The costume shop for the Lyric Opera of Chicago, the company that holds residence in this building as of 1954. If you ever get a chance, I do highly recommend coming to see some of our world-renowned opera and ballet. I'm a little bit biased because I used to work there, but it's definitely worth the trip if you happen to be here during our season when we're doing shows. Now we're heading back towards Wolf Point now, and I already mentioned to you that Wolf Point was really where Chicago kind of originated from, but I have yet to mention to you where the name Chicago originated from. And the name Chicago dates back to long before any of this was ever here. Back in the early days of this land, this was all marshy swampland. And the Native Americans who lived in this area started to notice a particular smell coming from that marshy swampland. So they started to call this area Chikaku, which in Potawatomi means land of the wild, smelly onions. Our Native American friends were well aware this was not the place to call home. However, we talked about those French-Canadian explorers, Marquette and Joliet. When they came through the area, they started to hear the words Chikaku, had no idea what it meant, mispronounced it into Chicago, probably with a cool French accent is my guess, and that is why we call Chicago, Chicago today. We're a land of wild, smelly onions. But what a place to call home, right? Now we're about to pass under our Lake Street Bridge here. Now our Lake Street Bridge is a double-decker, double-leaf bascule trunnion bridge. Say that 5 times fast. But double-decker bridge. You might have noticed up top there is some train tracks up there. That's for our CTA, our public transit trains. They ride atop this bridge. Down below is where our cars, pedestrians, and cyclists go. So double-decker bridge. Double leaf bridge, because this one opens from the center. Both sides open, double leaf. So this is also, again, one of those bascule trunnion bridges we've been talking about. This bridge is 109 years old, which is why it's going through a little bit of construction that you can see over here. It's going to be about a 2-year process to fully rehab this bridge to make sure that it is safe for another 109 years. pulling back into Wolf Point. Taking a look at this beautiful curvy blue and green glass building just off to the right. This one might look familiar if you've ever seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris's dad worked in this building here, originally opened in 1983. That movie is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, just fun facts as well. But this beautiful building is our new Veen building, and it's another example of that contextualism style of architecture. You'll see those two different colored stripes in the building. The blue stripes are meant to honor the beautiful blue of our Chicago sky. The green stripes are meant to honor the green of the river down below. And of course it curves along with our Chicago River. It also curves along with the Riverwalk. You'll see people enjoying this beautiful Saturday morning. Now this Riverwalk is one of our newer additions to the city. It extends about 1.3 miles in length. It goes all the way from Lake Michigan to Lake Street, that bridge we just passed under there. And the whole point of this Riverwalk is really to bring a little bit of life back to the Chicago River that gave Chicago its life. For so many years, this river was purely industrial. A lot of barges, a lot of meat packing, a lot of concrete, not a lot of people wanting to spend time down here. So the city said, well, what if we add in biking paths and walking paths? Wait, pause, you did it, congratulations, you got married! Woo! Saturday mornings are my favorite. There's just always people getting married, it's great. But all sorts of different things you'll see down here on our Riverwalk. So definitely come down and enjoy it.